The first interdimensional storm hit London at 14:32 Greenwich Mean Time on a Tuesday that would forever divide human history into before and after. Commander Alicia Ward was reviewing supply manifests in her underground office beneath the Thames when the emergency klaxons began their bone-deep wail. The reinforced concrete walls around her trembled, not from conventional seismic activity, but from something far more alien and terrifying. Commander Ward to Central Command. She barked into her comm unit, already moving toward the blast doors. Her military training kicked in automatically, 20 years of service compressed into efficient action. Central here, Commander. We're reading massive electromagnetic anomalies across all monitoring stations. The magnetic field. The voice crackled with static and fear. Christ, Alicia, it's gone. The magnetosphere just collapsed. Through the reinforced glass of the observation deck, Alicia watched the sky above London tear itself apart. What had been ordinary gray clouds moments before now writhed with impossible colors. Purples that hurt to look at, greens that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, and glimpses of something beyond that her mind refused to process. The interdimensional storm swept across the city like a living thing. Buildings didn't simply collapse. They twisted, their molecular structure rewritten by forces that operated according to physics from elsewhere. Steel became liquid mercury. Glass turned to crystal that sang in frequencies that made people weep. The Thames itself began flowing upward in spirals that defied gravity. Casualty reports coming in from all sectors. Lieutenant Morrison's voice cut through the chaos over the comm. We're looking at complete structural failure across 60% of the metropolitan area. Emergency services are overwhelmed. The hospitals. God, Commander, the hospitals are just gone. Replaced by something that looks like giant flowers made of metal. Alicia closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. A luxury she'd learned to afford herself in crisis situations. 3 seconds to process the impossible, to file away the grief and terror, and to focus on what came next. Morrison, initiate depth protocol immediately. I want all essential personnel, move to level 7 within the hour, and send a priority message to all global military commands. Earth is no longer protected. Whatever's been keeping these storms at bay, it's gone. She didn't yet know that humanity's magnetic field hadn't simply failed. It had been deliberately collapsed by forces that had been waiting centuries for this moment. She didn't know that 3 miles beneath her feet, in caverns that had existed since before the surface world developed written language, an entire civilization was preparing to reveal itself. And she certainly didn't know that the price of humanity's survival would be the surrender of humanity's future. But she would learn all of this soon enough. The first message from below arrived 72 hours after the initial collapse, when the interdimensional storms had reduced half of Earth's major cities to structures that belonged in fever dreams rather than on any earthly map. Alicia was coordinating refugee movements in the Deep London complex, one of the few military installations that had been built far enough underground to weather the storms, when her communications officer, Sergeant Shun, approached with an expression of bewildered terror. Commander, we're receiving a transmission on emergency frequencies, but it's not coming from any known source. The signal appears to be originating from directly below us, roughly 3 miles down. That's impossible, Chun. There's nothing 3 miles down except solid rock. Yes, ma'am. That's what makes this interesting. Chin handed her a tablet displaying seismic readings. We've been tracking these for the past hour. They're not natural formations. Someone's built something massive down there. The message, when it came through, was delivered in perfect English with an accent that seemed familiar yet completely alien, as if someone had learned the language from recordings of people who had been dead for centuries. Surface dwellers, I am speaking to you from the undercity of New Terra, established in the deep places of your world 347 years ago. I am Council Prime Marcus Velen, and I speak for the 47 million souls who have lived in exile beneath your feet since our banishment from our homeworld. Alicia felt her world shift in a way that had nothing to do with interdimensional physics. 47 million people living beneath the earth. For over 3 centuries. The voice continued. We know of your current crisis because we have endured similar storms for generations. Our homeworld, the parallel Earth from which we came, experienced the same magnetic collapse 400 years ago. We were exiled here by those who blamed us for the catastrophe, though we were merely the first to understand what was coming. Give me a direct line to this Marcus Velen, Alicia ordered. And I want geological surveys of everything below us. If there's a city down there, I want to know how we missed it. The connection took another 6 hours to establish, involving frequencies and transmission methods that seemed to bend the laws of physics as readily as the storms above ground. When Marcus Velen's image finally appeared on her screen, Alicia found herself looking at a man who could have been her contemporary, if not for his eyes. They held depths that spoke of centuries of hidden knowledge, of watching and waiting. "Commander Ward," Velen said, his pale features sharp and angular in the strange blue light of wherever he was transmitting from. "Your surface world is dying. The storms will continue to intensify until nothing remains but chaos and ruin. However, we possess the knowledge and the technology to restore stability, to rebuild your world stronger than it was before." "What's the catch?" Alicia asked bluntly. She'd been in enough negotiations to know that salvation always came with a price. Velen smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. "The catch, as you put it, is simple. We have lived in exile long enough. When we rebuild your world, it will be under our guidance, following our designs. Your people will be citizens of New Terra, not rulers of it. We offer survival, Commander Ward. The only question is whether you're wise enough to accept it." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Alicia staring at a blank screen while London continued to transform into something alien above her head. 2 weeks after first contact with the Undercity, Alicia found herself descending through elevator shafts that hadn't appeared on any blueprint ever filed with the British government. The delegation she led consisted of her most trusted officers and a handful of world leaders who had survived the storms and could reach the deep London complex. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, formerly of MIT before MIT became a crystalline maze that sang lullabies in languages that predated human speech, served as their chief scientific advisor. General Harrison Brooks, whose entire Pacific Command had been relocated to underground facilities when the storms hit the Ring of Fire, represented the American military response. Prime Minister Elizabeth Carr had been pulled from the ruins of Parliament and still bore the strange shimmer that came from brief exposure to interdimensional energy. "Depth reading shows we've passed the 3-mile mark," Dr. Hendricks reported, consulting instruments that seemed to blend human technology with devices she'd never seen before, gifts from their host below. "The atmospheric composition is changing. Higher oxygen content, trace elements I can't identify. The elevator, if it could still be called that after the modifications the underground had made, continued its descent through rock that showed clear signs of artificial excavation. The walls were smooth, almost organic in their curves, and embedded with bioluminescent materials that provided steady, blue-white illumination. "Commander," General Brooks murmured, "I'm reading massive power signatures ahead. Whatever they've built down here, it's bigger than anything we ever imagined." When the elevator finally stopped and the doors opened, Alicia stepped into a world that redefined her understanding of what was possible. The Undercity of New Terra stretched before them like a vision from humanity's future, or perhaps its past. Vast caverns had been carved from the living rock and filled with structures that seemed to grow rather than be built. Spires of what looked like crystallized starlight reached toward cavern ceilings that had been crafted to resemble open sky, complete with artificial suns that provided warm, natural light. But it was the inhabitants that truly struck Alicia speechless. They were human, undeniably so, but there was something about them that marked them as fundamentally different. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed to ignore small inconveniences like gravity. Their eyes held flecks of the same interdimensional colors that writhed in the storms above. And when they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "Welcome to New Terra," Marcus Velen said, approaching with an entourage of figures who radiated authority and power. Up close, he was even more unsettling, tall and elegant, with silver hair that seemed to move independently of any breeze, and skin that held the faintest luminescence. "You are the first surface dwellers to visit our realm in 3 centuries. We hope it will mark the beginning of a new age of cooperation." Dr. Hendricks was already taking readings with her modified instruments. "Commander," The energy signatures here are off the charts. They're using power sources I can't even begin to classify. Our technology has evolved considerably during our exile, Velen explained, noting her confusion. When you live for generations in close proximity to interdimensional boundaries, you learn to harness forces that surface science considers impossible. He gestured toward the sprawling city around them. 47 million of us have lived here since our banishment, growing strong, developing new capabilities. We have become something more than the humans who first arrived here. We have become what humanity needs to survive what is coming. And what is coming? Prime Minister Carr asked, her voice still rough from her exposure to the storms. Velen's expression grew grave. The magnetic collapse was not a natural phenomenon. It was the first phase of an invasion that has been building for millennia. The storms you see are scouts, testing your world's defenses. What follows will be armies from dimensions where the very concept of mercy has never evolved. General Brooks stepped forward. You're saying Earth is under attack. Has been under attack, General. Your world simply never recognized the threat. We did, on our homeworld. We tried to warn them, tried to prepare defenses. For our efforts, we were branded as extremists and exiled here to what they considered a primitive, defenseless world. Velen paused, looking up toward the distant surface where the storms continued their work of transformation. They were wrong about Earth being defenseless, of course. Your planet had its own natural barriers, its own forms of protection. But those barriers are failing now, just as they did on our world. The only difference is that this time, we're here to help. At what cost? Alicia asked. She'd been listening to the exchange, but her attention was focused on the city around them. Everything she saw spoke of advanced technology, of power that dwarfed anything the surface world had achieved. But there was something else, something that made her skin crawl. The people, the underground humans, moved like they were performers in a play, their actions too coordinated, too perfect. The cost is governance, Commander Ward. When we restore your world, it will be according to our design, under our leadership. Your people will be valued citizens, but they will not be decision-makers. The surface world has proven that it cannot be trusted with its own survival. And if we refuse, Velen's smile was sharp as broken crystal. Then you will join the growing collection of dead worlds that litter the interdimensional void. The choice, as always, is yours to make. 3 days into their stay in the Undercity, Alicia began to understand the true magnitude of what the underground humans had accomplished and what they were asking in return. Dr. Hendricks had been given unprecedented access to their research facilities, emerging from each session with information that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics, biology, and the nature of reality itself. They're not just human anymore, Alicia, she reported during a private briefing in the quarters they'd been assigned, luxurious by underground standards, but clearly designed to remind them that they were guests, not equals. They've been adapting to interdimensional energies for centuries. Their biology has shifted in ways that are both fascinating and terrifying. Explain. Their cellular structure includes components that exist partially in parallel dimensions. They can manipulate matter at the quantum level through conscious intent. And their lifespans. Hendricks paused, checking her notes. Marcus Velen isn't just old, Alicia. He's old. Best I can tell, he was alive when they first arrived here 347 years ago. That's impossible. So we're interdimensional storms until last week. The underground humans have become something new, and they've had centuries to perfect whatever they've become. The technology we're seeing isn't just advanced, it's evolved. It grows, adapts, thinks. General Brooks had been conducting his own investigations into their military capabilities. His report was even more disturbing. They have weapons that operate on principles I can't begin to understand, he told them. Not just energy-based, but devices that can alter the fundamental constants of physics within localized areas. They showed me a demonstration. Turn a steel plate into empty space, then back to steel, then into something that looked like liquid music. More concerning, he continued, is their intelligence network. They've been watching us, Alicia. They have monitoring stations throughout the underground infrastructure of every major city on Earth. They know our military deployments, our resource allocations, our political structures. They've been preparing for this moment for decades. But it was Prime Minister Carr who uncovered the most chilling aspect of their host's offer. "I've been speaking with some of their historians," she reported. "The story they told us about being exiled for trying to warn their homeworld, it's not entirely accurate. They weren't exiled for being alarmists. They were exiled because they were the ones who caused the magnetic collapse in the first place." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. According to their own records, Carr continued, they were conducting experiments in interdimensional manipulation. They believed they could access unlimited energy sources by tapping into parallel realities. The magnetic field collapse was a side effect of their research, one they knew was likely to occur. "They destroyed their own world," Alicia said quietly. "And now they want to control ours," Hendricks added. "The question is, are they offering to save us, or are they completing a plan that's been centuries in the making?" That evening, Marcus Velen invited Alicia to join him for what he called a walk through history. They traveled to the deepest levels of the Undercity, where the original excavations had been carved by the first generation of exiles. Here, the architecture was different, rougher, more desperate. These were not the soaring spires of the upper levels, but functional spaces carved by people who expected to die in exile rather than build a civilization. The first generation lived in these caverns for 40 years before the first children were born who could survive the interdimensional energies, Velen explained as they walked through what had once been a provisional shelter and was now a memorial. "We lost many in those early years, to madness, to cellular breakdown, to simple despair." They paused before a wall covered in names. Thousands of them, carved in scripts that had evolved over the centuries from familiar letters into something altogether more alien. "My parents' names are here," Velen said, pointing to symbols that meant nothing to Alicia. They were scientists like Dr. Hendricks. They believed that knowledge was worth any risk, any sacrifice. They were wrong, of course. Some knowledge carries prices too high to pay. Yet here you are, asking us to pay that same price. Velen turned to face her, and in the dim light of the memorial chamber, his eyes seemed to hold depths that stretched into infinity. "The difference, Commander Ward, is that we are offering you a choice. Our homeworld never had that luxury. When the collapse came, it came without warning, without preparation. By the time anyone understood what was happening, it was too late to do anything but die. And the 47 million people living here, did they have a choice? They had the choice of extinction or evolution. They chose evolution." Velen gestured toward the memorial wall. "Those names represent the last generation of pure humans among us. Everyone born since has been something new, something better adapted to the realities of interdimensional existence. Better adapted or better controlled?" Velen's smile was sharp. "An interesting question. Does it matter if the result is survival?" While Alicia and her delegation explored the wonders and horrors of the Undercity, the situation on the surface continued to deteriorate. The interdimensional storms had moved beyond simple destruction. They were actively reshaping reality according to alien principles. Reports came in through the few remaining communication networks. New York had become a maze of buildings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their floors connecting to versions of themselves from parallel realities. Tokyo had been transformed into a garden of metal trees that sang the memories of everyone who had ever died there. The ruins of Paris were populated by shadows of people who had never existed, living lives that followed scripts written in languages that predated human speech. But the most disturbing reports came from Moscow, where the interdimensional energies had apparently achieved something resembling consciousness. "The entire city is moving," Lieutenant Morrison reported via quantum-encrypted transmission from one of the few remaining surface observation posts. "Not just changing, but moving with purpose. The buildings rearrange themselves based on the emotional states of anyone who enters, and the people who were caught in the transformation. Commander, they're still alive, but they're part of the city now. The architecture speaks with their voices." Alicia received these reports in her assigned quarters in the Undercity, surrounded by the impossible beauty of humanity's potential future and the growing certainty that accepting it would mean surrendering humanity's soul. Dr. Hendricks had continued her research into underground technology and biology, and her latest findings were troubling in ways that went beyond scientific curiosity. "They're not just adapted to interdimensional forces," she explained during another private briefing. "They're dependent on them. Their biology requires constant exposure to parallel dimension energies to function. If they were separated from this environment for more than a few hours, their cellular structure would collapse. Which means what exactly? It means they can never return to the surface, Alicia. Not as they are now. If they're going to rule a rebuilt Earth, it's going to have to be an Earth that's been permanently altered to accommodate their needs. General Brooks nodded grimly. I've been thinking about their offer. They keep talking about rebuilding our world, but they never explain what that rebuilt world would look like. Now I think I understand. They're planning to terraform the entire planet to match their underground environment. 47 million of them, 7 billion of us, Prime Minister Carr observed. Under normal circumstances, the numbers would be on our side. But these aren't normal circumstances, and they're not normal humans. That night, Alicia found herself unable to sleep. She wandered the halls of the guest quarters, trying to process the impossible choice that lay before them. Surrender Earth's independence to ensure humanity's survival, or maintain their freedom and watch their species go extinct in the interdimensional chaos above. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the sound of voices coming from one of the council chambers. Moving carefully, she approached the partially open door and listened. The surface delegation is beginning to understand the scope of our offer, Marcus Velen was saying. Commander Ward, in particular, is more perceptive than we anticipated. Does this pose a problem? The voice belonged to another member of the Underground Council, someone Alicia hadn't met. Not a problem, but it may require adjustments to our timeline. We had hoped to allow them several more weeks to witness the destruction above, to fully appreciate their need for our assistance. However, if they're beginning to suspect the full implications of our offer, we may need to accelerate our plans. The transformation systems are ready, a third voice added. The surface cities that haven't been completely destroyed by the storms can be converted within 72 hours once we begin the process. And the surface population? Those who adapt will be welcomed into the new order. Those who don't. There was a pause, and Alicia found herself holding her breath. The interdimensional forces are very effective at identifying biological incompatibilities. Natural selection will handle the rest. Very well. Prepare the transformation systems. If the surface delegation hasn't agreed to our terms within 48 hours, we proceed without their consent. Alicia backed away from the door, her heart pounding with more than just fear. The underground hadn't been waiting for humanity's consent. They'd been waiting for humanity's surrender. And if they didn't get it, they were prepared to take what they wanted anyway. The revelation that the underground planned to proceed with or without human consent changed everything. Alicia called an emergency meeting with her delegation, held in the one room in their quarters that Dr. Hendricks had confirmed was free of monitoring devices, a small maintenance closet that apparently held no interest for their hosts. We're not guests here, she told them without preamble. We're prisoners being given the illusion of choice, while our captors prepare to take what they want anyway. She related what she'd overheard, watching as the faces of her companions shifted from confusion to understanding to grim determination. The question now is what we do about it, General Brooks said. We're 3 miles underground, surrounded by 47 million people who have had centuries to perfect technologies we can barely understand. Our options are somewhat limited. Not as limited as they think, Dr. Hendricks interjected. I've been analyzing their technology, and I think I've found something interesting. They're dependent on the interdimensional energies, yes, but that dependency has a weakness. She pulled out her modified scanning device, showing them readings she'd taken throughout the Undercity. Their entire infrastructure is connected to what they call the Nexus, a massive interdimensional gateway that channels energy from parallel realities. Everything here is powered by it, including their biology. If we could disrupt that connection, we'd be murdering 47 million people, Prime Minister Carr said quietly. Or saving 7 billion, General Brooks countered. There might be another option, Alicia said. What if we could use their own technology against them? Not to destroy them, but to level the playing field. Hendricks frowned. I'm not sure I follow. You said their biology is adapted to interdimensional forces. What would happen if we exposed ourselves to the same energies? Could we develop similar capabilities? Theoretically, yes, but the process would be challenging. The first generation of underground humans lost 60% of their population to the adaptation process. And that was over the course of decades. we'd be talking about a much more compressed timeline. How compressed? Hours, maybe days. The energies required to produce rapid adaptation would be lethal to most people. We'd be looking at survival rates in the single digits. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of impossible choices. There's something else, Alicia said finally. I think Marcus Velen has been lying about more than just their exile. I think he's been lying about the invasion. She pulled out her own datapad, showing them orbital imagery that had been transmitted from the few remaining satellites before the storms knocked out most of the communication network. Look at these patterns. The storms aren't random. They're following specific geographic lines, but not lines that would make sense for an invasion. They're following the exact locations where the underground has monitoring stations. General Brooks studied the images. You're suggesting that they're controlling the storms. I'm suggesting that they are the storms. Or at least, they're the source of them. They didn't come here as refugees from an interdimensional invasion. They came here as advanced scouts for one. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The magnetic field collapse, the interdimensional energies, the transformation of the surface cities. It's all been orchestrated, Alicia continued. They've been preparing Earth for colonization, just not by refugees fleeing a destroyed world. They've been preparing it for colonization by the civilization that destroyed their original world. Dr. Hendricks was checking her readings again, cross-referencing them with the data Alicia had shown them. It fits, she said finally. The energy signatures, the technological patterns, even the biological adaptations. They're not evolved humans. They're human-alien hybrids, designed to serve as a bridge between our species and something else. Which means, Prime Minister Carr said slowly, that if we accept their offer of alliance, we're not just surrendering our independence. We're surrendering our species. And if we don't accept, General Brooks asked, then they proceed with their plans anyway, and we get to watch 7 billion people die in the transformation process, Alicia replied. Unless we can find a way to stop them. 3 of us, against 47 million of them, 3 miles underground, with technology that can rewrite the laws of physics, Brooks observed. I've faced worse odds, but I can't remember when. Not 3 of us, Alicia said. 7 billion of us. If we can get word to the surface, if we can warn them what's really happening. The communication networks are down, Carr pointed out. Not all of them. Alicia was thinking fast now, pieces of a plan beginning to form in her mind. The underground has been monitoring surface communications for centuries. They have to have their own network, something that can reach the surface, even through the storms. You want to steal their communication system? I want to use it. Marcus Velen offered us the chance to witness their technology, to understand their capabilities. I think it's time we took him up on that offer. The plan, such as it was, relied on Marcus Velen's arrogance and the underground certainty that surface humans were technologically inferior. Alicia would request a comprehensive tour of their facilities, ostensibly to better understand what they were offering. Dr. Hendricks would focus on their communication systems, looking for a way to send a warning to any surface installations still capable of receiving it. General Brooks would assess their defenses, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. Prime Minister Carr would continue her conversations with underground historians, trying to uncover more details about their true origins and intentions. It was a desperate plan with minimal chance of success, but it was the only plan they had. I want to understand what you're offering us, Alicia told Marcus Velen the next morning. My people need to know what they'll be getting if they accept your alliance. Show me everything. Velen's smile was predatory, but pleased. Of course, Commander. I had hoped you would ask. There is so much to see, so much to learn. The tour began in the energy generation facilities, where massive crystalline structures channeled power from what Velen called the spaces between realities. The technology was beyond anything in Alicia's experience, but she made careful mental notes of everything she saw: power flow patterns, control interfaces, security measures. The Nexus is the heart of our civilization, Velen explained as they stood before a towering structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through it, we access the unlimited energies of parallel worlds. With it, we can reshape matter, manipulate time, even adjust the fundamental constants of physics within localized areas. And you're offering to share this technology with us? We're offering to use it for your benefit. The distinction is important, Commander Ward. This technology requires generations of adaptation to use safely. Your people would need to undergo the same transformation we did. And as you've seen, not everyone survives the process. Dr. Hendricks was examining the control systems with her modified scanners, making notes that looked innocuous but were actually detailed technical specifications. The harmonics are incredible, she murmured. I've never seen energy patterns this complex. Dr. Hendricks has a gift for understanding the subtle aspects of our technology, Velen observed. Perhaps you would be interested in seeing our communication arrays. We have developed methods of transmitting information across interdimensional barriers that your surface science would consider impossible. Alicia felt her pulse quicken. That sounds fascinating. How do you communicate with? Well, with anyone outside this reality. An excellent question. Come, let me show you. The communication facility was located in a section of the Undercity that felt different from the rest. Older, more organic, as if it had grown rather than been built. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to carry information, and the air itself hummed with frequencies that made Alicia's teeth ache. Interdimensional communication requires more than simple electromagnetic transmission, Velen explained as they walked through corridors lined with structures that looked like hybrid technology organisms. We must modulate our signals through the quantum substrate that underlies all realities. It's complex, but the results are remarkable. We can send messages to parallel versions of Earth, to alien civilizations in distant dimensions, even to points in the past and future. Dr. Hendricks was practically vibrating with excitement, some of it genuine scientific curiosity, some of it carefully performed enthusiasm designed to keep Velen talking. The implications are staggering. You could communicate with anyone, anywhere, anywhen. Indeed. And we do. We maintain regular contact with our sponsors in the primary dimension, providing them with progress reports on the terraforming of this reality. Alicia felt ice form in her stomach. Sponsors? The civilization that sent us here, of course. Did you think we undertook this project independently? We are merely the advance force, preparing your world for full colonization. Once the transformation is complete, they will arrive to establish their new colony. Velen seemed to realize he had revealed more than intended, because his expression shifted subtly. But of course, that is a concern for the distant future. For now, our focus is on ensuring your people's survival through the current crisis. They spent another hour touring the communication facility, with Dr. Hendricks asking increasingly technical questions that Velen answered with growing enthusiasm. By the time they left, she had enough information to understand not just how the system worked, but how to access it. Meanwhile, General Brooks was getting his own education in underground military capabilities. What he saw was both impressive and terrifying. Weapons that could erase matter from existence, defensive systems that operated in dimensions human senses couldn't perceive, and tactical capabilities that rendered traditional military thinking obsolete. We have no need for crude kinetic weapons, his guide, an underground commander named Theron, explained. Why destroy when you can simply translate? Watch. Theron demonstrated with a target drone, using a device that looked like a crystalline flute. When he played a specific sequence of notes, the drone didn't explode or disintegrate. It simply ceased to exist in their reality. According to the readings on Theron's instruments, it had been translated to a parallel dimension where the laws of physics made its continued existence impossible. Efficient, Brooks observed, while making mental notes about the device's construction and operation. What's the range? Limited only by our ability to maintain quantum coherence across interdimensional barriers. Theoretically, we could translate objects anywhere in your solar system, though the energy requirements would be considerable. Brooks nodded appreciatively while calculating the implications. If they could target objects in orbit, no surface military installation would be safe. Earth's defensive capabilities were even more limited than he'd feared. Prime Minister Carr was having her own revelations in the Underground's archives, where she was learning that their version of history contained some disturbing gaps and inconsistencies. The records from the first century of exile are remarkably detailed, her guide, an elderly underground scholar named Mira, explained. But the earlier records, from their homeworld, are fragmentary. Much was lost during the transition. What kind of things were lost? Cultural records, mostly. Personal histories. Details about their original civilization. It's quite tragic, really. They remember the technical knowledge needed for survival, but much of their cultural identity was sacrificed in the process. Carr was examining one of the few remaining artifacts from the Underground's homeworld, a crystalline data storage device that seemed to shift between different configurations as she watched. May I ask what this contains? Historical records from their homeworld's final days. But I'm afraid it's incomplete, damaged during the transition. What remains is disturbing. In what way? Mira hesitated. Perhaps you should see for yourself. The artifact projected its contents as three-dimensional images that formed in the air above the storage device. What Carr saw made her blood run cold. The images showed cities that looked remarkably similar to the transformed surface cities Earth was currently experiencing. Buildings that existed in multiple dimensions, landscapes that shifted according to alien geometries, people who had been integrated into architectural structures. But these weren't images of a world under attack. They were images of a world that had been successfully colonized. This is your home world? Carr asked. After the transformation, yes. According to these records, the colonization was ultimately successful. The original population was integrated into the new reality structure, and the colonizing force established permanent settlements. And the underground humans? Where do they fit in this? Myra's expression was troubled. That's the disturbing part, Prime Minister. According to these records, they weren't exiled as refugees. They were sent here as colonization specialists, designed to repeat the same process on parallel worlds. Carr felt the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with horrible clarity. They're not refugees at all. They're an invasion force. It would appear so. Though I suspect most of them don't realize it. The cultural conditioning runs very deep, and the transformation process affects memory as well as biology. That evening, the four surface delegates met again in their cramped hiding place to share what they had learned. The picture that emerged was even worse than they had feared. They're not just planning to colonize Earth, Alicia summarized. They're planning to repeat the same process they've carried out on dozens of other worlds. The underground humans aren't evil. They're victims who've been turned into tools. But the result is the same. The complete transformation of our reality to serve an alien agenda. And we have less than 24 hours before they begin the process, whether we agree or not, Dr. Hendricks added. The communication system is ready. I can send a warning to any surface installations still capable of receiving it. But I don't know if anyone will be able to act on it. What kind of warning? General Brooks asked. Technical specifications for disrupting their power grid. If we can interrupt their connection to the Nexus, their entire infrastructure will collapse. But it will also kill everyone in the Undercity, Prime Minister Carr finished. 47 million people who are victims of this process, as much as we are. Maybe not, Alicia said slowly. What if there's a way to reverse the process? To free them from whatever conditioning has been imposed on them? Dr. Hendricks was quiet for a long moment. Theoretically possible, but we need access to their central control systems. And we need to do it before they begin the surface transformation. Then that's what we do. We get access to their control systems, we send the warning to the surface, and we try to save everyone, both the people above and the people below. General Brooks looked at her with something approaching admiration. It's completely insane. You realize that? Insane times call for insane measures. Are you in? One by one, they nodded their agreement. They had one night to save 2 civilizations. At 0300 hours, while the Undercity settled into its deepest cycle of rest, for surface humans began their desperate attempt to prevent the extinction of their species. Dr. Hendricks moved first, using access codes she had memorized during their tour to enter the communication facility. The bioluminescent corridors pulsed with slower rhythms during the night cycle, and the hybrid technology organisms that lined the walls seemed to sleep fitfully, their patterns dim and sporadic. The main communication array was a cathedral of crystalline structures that reached toward the cavern's ceiling like frozen music. Each one was attuned to a different dimensional frequency, capable of reaching across the interdimensional void to parallel realities, alien civilizations, and points in time that existed only in theoretical physics. Hendricks located the transmission controls and began the delicate process of accessing the surface communication network. The technology was alien in its sophistication, but the underlying principles were recognizable: quantum entanglement, dimensional resonance, probability, wave manipulation. She had perhaps 30 minutes before the night shift personnel arrived for their rounds. Meanwhile, General Brooks was making his way toward the Underground's command center, using service tunnels that Theron had mentioned during their military tour. His objective was to assess their defensive capabilities and, if possible, locate the controls for their weapon systems. The command center was housed in a structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Brooks could see it from multiple angles simultaneously, as if his perception had been shifted to accommodate dimensions his mind couldn't normally process. The experience was disorienting, but his military training kept him focused on his mission. Inside, he found banks of monitoring stations that tracked everything happening on Earth's surface and beyond. Holographic displays showed the status of the interdimensional storms, the progress of the transformation in various surface cities, and, most chilling of all, the positions of what appear to be massive structures approaching Earth from points in space that didn't correspond to any known celestial objects. The invasion fleet, Brooks realized, the sponsors Marcus Velen had mentioned were already on their way. Prime Minister Carr had the most dangerous assignment: returning to the archives to gather definitive proof of the Underground's true purpose, information that could be transmitted to the surface as part of Hendricks' warning. But first, she needed to access the restricted sections that Mira had only hinted at during their earlier conversation. The archive facility at night was a maze of shifting data streams and holographic information displays that rearranged themselves according to patterns that followed alien logic. Carr made her way deeper into the facility, following corridors that seemed to bend space around themselves until she was no longer certain which direction led back to the entrance. She found what she was looking for in a chamber that existed in a state of temporal flux, past, present, and future overlaid in a constantly shifting kaleidoscope of information. Here were the true records of the Underground's homeworld, not the sanitized versions available to casual researchers, but the complete documentation of a successful interdimensional colonization. The images were horrifying in their clarity. Entire populations had been absorbed into architectural structures that serve as processing centers for alien colonizers. The transformation hadn't been quick or merciful. It had been gradual, allowing the colonizers to extract maximum information about human psychology, biology, and culture before completing the integration process. But most disturbing of all were the records showing how the colonization specialists were created. Humans who had been subjected to interdimensional conditioning that rewrote their personalities, their memories, their fundamental understanding of reality. They genuinely believed they were refugees, genuinely believed they were offering salvation. The conditioning was so complete that they would fight to the death to defend their colonizing mission, convinced they were protecting both themselves and their targets. Carr gathered as much data as she could, downloading it to storage devices that Hendricks had modified to interface with Underground technology. When she finally made her way back toward the guest quarters, she carried with her the complete truth about what Earth was facing. Alicia had the most complex task, infiltrating the central control systems of the Undercity to find a way to disrupt the colonization process without destroying the Underground population. Her target was the Nexus itself, the interdimensional gateway that powered their entire civilization. The Nexus chamber was located at the deepest point of the Undercity, where the boundary between dimensions was thinnest. Approaching it required passing through layers of security that operated on principles of physics that didn't apply in normal reality. Alicia found herself walking through walls that became permeable when approached with the right mental configuration, past guardians that existed only as probability functions, and through locks that opened when solved like multidimensional puzzles. The Nexus itself was beyond anything she had imagined, a sphere of pure, interdimensional energy suspended in a chamber that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Around it, control systems that looked like crystallized thought patterns monitored every aspect of the colonization process. Here, Alicia could see the true scope of what the Underground had accomplished. The interdimensional storms weren't just transforming Earth's surface. They were preparing it for the arrival of colonizing forces that would complete the integration process. The timeline showed the transformation accelerating over the next 72 hours, with final colonization beginning within the week. But the control systems also revealed something else. The process was reversible, at least partially. The interdimensional conditioning that had created the underground humans could be disrupted, their original personalities restored. It would require precisely calibrated energy pulses through the nexus, timed to coincide with specific brainwave patterns. It was possible, but it would require someone with intimate knowledge of the system to execute it properly. Someone like Marcus Velen. At 0430 hours, the 4 delegates reconvened in their meeting place, carrying with them information that painted a complete picture of humanity's situation. It was worse than they had feared, but not entirely hopeless. "The communication system is ready," Hendricks reported. "I can transmit technical specifications for disrupting their power grid to any surface installation capable of receiving it. But the disruption would need to be coordinated across multiple points simultaneously to be effective. Their command center shows invasion fleets already en route," Brooks added. "We're not just facing a colonization attempt. We're facing a full-scale invasion by forces that have perfected this process across multiple realities. Earth has maybe a week before it becomes impossible to resist." "The archives confirm it," Carr said. "They've done this before, many times. But the process can be reversed, at least partially. The underground humans are victims, not willing collaborators. And the Nexus can be used to free them," Alicia concluded. "But it requires someone who understands the system from the inside. We need Marcus Velen's cooperation." "You want to trust the leader of an invasion force?" Brooks asked skeptically. "I want to give him the chance to remember who he used to be before the conditioning took hold. If we can break the interdimensional programming, we might be able to turn him into an ally instead of an enemy. And if we can't, then we implement Dr. Hendricks' disruption plan and hope that 7 billion people can somehow survive what comes next without any underground allies at all." The plan they developed was desperate and complex, requiring precise timing and more than a little luck. But it was their only chance to save both populations, the 7 billion humans on the surface and the 47 million victims in the undercity below. They had 6 hours until Marcus Velen's deadline. 6 hours to prevent the colonization of Earth and the extinction of humanity as an independent species. It would have to be enough. At 0800 hours, exactly 10 hours before Marcus Velen's deadline, Alicia requested a private meeting with the underground leader. The request was granted immediately. Velen's confidence in his position made him assume that she was ready to discuss the terms of humanity's surrender. They met in his private chambers, a space that existed in a state of controlled dimensional flux. The walls showed views of what appeared to be dozens of different realities, some showing the transformed surface of Earth, others displaying alien landscapes that defied description. In the center of it all, Marcus Velen sat behind a desk that seemed to be carved from crystallized time itself. "Commander Ward," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat across from him. "I trust your tour of our facilities has given you a better understanding of what we're offering your people." "It has," Alicia replied. "I understand now that you're not offering us a choice at all. You're planning to proceed with the surface transformation, whether we agree or not." Velen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the dimensional resonance of the room. "I had hoped you would be more perceptive than to mistake inevitability for malice, Commander. We are not your enemies." "Aren't you?" "Let me tell you what I've learned about your people, Marcus. You're not refugees from a parallel Earth. You're colonization specialists, sent here by an interdimensional empire to prepare our world for invasion. The conditioning you've undergone has convinced you that you're offering salvation, but what you're actually offering is extinction." Now Velen's expression did change, cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. "You're mistaken, Commander. We are exiles, survivors of a catastrophe we try to prevent. Our offer of alliance is genuine." "Then explain this." Alicia activated a holographic projector that Dr. Hendricks had prepared, showing the archival footage that Prime Minister Carr had recovered. The images of Velen's homeworld after successful colonization filled the air between them. Cities integrated into alien structures, populations absorbed into architectural processing centers, landscapes transformed beyond recognition. "This is your homeworld, Marcus, not destroyed by interdimensional invasion, but successfully colonized by one. And these, She shifted the display to show the underground humans during their early years in exile. Are your people being conditioned to serve as colonization specialists for future worlds? Velen stared at the images, his face cycling through emotions that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal human expressions could accommodate. This is not how I remember it. Because your memories have been altered. The conditioning process doesn't just adapt your biology to interdimensional forces. It rewrites your personality, your history, your fundamental understanding of reality. You genuinely believe you're offering us salvation because that's what you've been programmed to believe. No. Velen's voice carried harmonics that made the crystalline walls around them resonate. No. We chose exile rather than submit to the colonization process. We came here as refugees, seeking to rebuild what we had lost. Look at the images, Marcus. Really look at them. Don't let the conditioning filter what you're seeing. For a long moment, Velen stared at the holographic display, his inhuman eyes tracking details that normal human vision couldn't perceive. Slowly, his expression began to change. The architectural integration patterns, he whispered. They're the same ones we're implementing on the surface. The dimensional resonance frequencies, the biological absorption protocols. We're not preventing what happened to our homeworld. We're repeating it. The conditioning runs deep, Alicia said gently. But it can be broken. The Nexus has systems designed to reverse the process, to restore original personality patterns. I can show you how to use them. Why? Velen looked at her with eyes that suddenly seemed ancient and infinitely weary. Why would you help me remember what I've done? What I've helped do to dozens of worlds? Because 47 million people in this undercity are victims, not villains. Because 7 billion people on the surface deserve a chance to survive. And because I think the person you were before the conditioning would want to help us stop this. Velen was quiet for a long time, staring at images of his homeworld's transformation. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a sadness that seemed to echo across dimensions. Show me, he said.